So we've done the paragraphs numbered 1 and 2, and let's do the same thing with paragraph number 3. And I'm noticing that there's a pattern here. Paragraph 2 and paragraph 3 have started with sentence fragments. Now I can't have a sentence fragment as a premise, so I need to figure out how to turn them into claims. And I need to go back and remind myself what number I'm up to. I'm up to 17. So premise number 17 is, it's acceptable to boo sports players for off-the-field antisocial behavior. And the structure of this argument is getting clear to me. The author is delineating, listing several cases, several situations in which it's appropriate to boo players at sporting events. So I think in my mind this is starting to look like a lot of independent premises, all of which have evidence given for them. Okay, so I think 17 is going to give evidence to 1. Let's make a bunch of text boxes so we can use them. Okay, so what claims is the author using to convince me that it's acceptable to boo sports players for off-the-field antisocial behavior? Sometimes schools and leagues discipline their own, sometimes they don't. Schools and leagues don't always discipline their athletes. So I don't think the author really needs to say sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I don't need to separate those two things, because the real claim the author is making is that schools and leagues don't always discipline their athletes. And I guess I should be a little bit more specific here and say for off the field antisocial behavior, right? Because that's what this sub-argument is about. So I'm going to just paraphrase that a little bit. I think that's a little more precise. All right, let's go. If we don't want perpetuators of domestic violence, assault, and public endangerment to be paid huge salaries while entertaining our families, then we have to embarrass them on the field of play. Okay, how do I phrase that? This should be a more efficient way of doing that. Because, okay, so we've made the claims that the schools and leagues don't always do it. If athletes, oops, this is number 19, got to remember to keep numbering them. If athletes are not disciplined for off the field antisocial behavior, they can end up being paid huge salaries while also committing serious crimes. Lots of different ways of saying this. You may want to keep the level of detail of talking about not just any crimes, but particular crimes regarding domestic violence, assault, that sort of thing. I don't think the details are actually important. Sometimes they're crucial, but I'm not sure they're important. The central claim here is that if they're not disciplined, then they can end up in this situation. Couple of claims right now that I see off the top. 20, we don't want athletes to be paid huge salaries while also committing serious crimes. That's unstated. The author just assumes that to be the case. And maybe it is the case, maybe it's not. But if it's not the case, premise number 19 is not going to function well. And then I think there is another unstated premise we should discipline the athletes by booing them. Because look at what the author is claiming. They don't always discipline their athletes. If the athletes are not disciplined, this situation can arise. We don't want that situation to arise. Therefore, and it's not this one, it's not these three are not giving evidence directly to this. It's giving evidence to 21. It's saying we need to, the fans, people who aren't the schools and athletes. So I'm going to choose all of these. I'm going to link them, and then I'm going to choose an arrow and say this gives evidence to this. I'm going to choose the arrow again. This gives, oops, yeah, I did want to move it a little bit actually. Let's just move it there for now. And then this gives evidence for that. Okay, I like it. That's a good way of articulating the structure of the argument that's found in that first paragraph. Now, let me look at that last sentence. And I think I've got 21 in then we have to embarrass them on the field of play. A clearer way of articulating that idea is we should discipline the athletes by booing them. So I've got that one. Home and visiting players alike bring this upon themselves. Honestly, I don't know exactly. That is such a vague sentence and idea. I'm really sort of befuddled on what to do with it. Let me try. I'm going to try to fuss with it a little bit, but part of me feels like that's rhetoric. That's sort of rhetorical flourishing. It's not really part of the argument. But let me see if I can turn it into a premise. Home and away teams. How do I put it? Home and away players are responsible for the booing because they committed the off the field antisocial behavior. What the author is trying to say here is like, look, it's the athletes who did the things, the athletes who committed acts of violence or who committed acts of vandalism. And if they get booed, it's because they did something wrong. Okay, it's their fault. So I think I can put that here. I don't think it has anything to do with this argument, because this argument is really about what could happen in the future. Just move that down a little bit. This really directly gives evidence to this. Okay, so I think that's what I'm going to do with that. I wouldn't argue with someone who said, "Oh, that's just flourishing. It's not really a big part of the argument." But I would rather err on the side of completeness. Better safe than sorry. If I think the author is using the claim, then better to have it in there. Okay. I'm looking for a place to put this canvas where it's out of the way. I think I'll do that, and I'll just move this over here. How about that? Let's see what else this paragraph number 3 has to offer us in terms of premises. I'll go make a bunch more. We've got a nice sub-argument going here. We've got places for lots of different claims, but the paragraph isn't over. Let's see what else it says. Again, it's a chance to indulge in catharsis with a social conscience. So there's a claim here that booing, I think I'm up to 23, it looks like, 23, booing athletes for off the field antisocial behavior is, and I'm thinking about how to phrase this, consistent with one's conscience, is ethically justified. Lots of different ways to say that, but when they say you can do it with a clean conscience, it's okay to do. Okay, and move that around. Don't know where that's going to live quite yet. When university or team economics turn a blind eye, we don't have to. This principle extends to any infractions for which normal people lose their jobs. Very similar to the argument we saw in the previous paragraph. Why is it ethically justified? Because sometimes, how did they put it? University or team economics turned a blind eye. Other institutions, such as universities or teams, don't always it's really the same as 18, isn't it? I was just about to don't always discipline their athletes for off the, we already have that. I'm going to delete that. We are ahead. If we need to reuse it, I'll call it 18 and I'll reply. But let's see how it's going to be used. We don't have to. This principle extends to any infractions for which normal people would lose their jobs, or for being even just plain tacky, or even lacking any sense of fan appreciation. Let them have it. I'm trying to figure out, is that just a repetition of this? They don't always discipline if they are not. Now, it's not quite that. This paragraph isn't making this claim, but it is being a little bit more general. If they're not going to do it, we should do it. But don't we already have that? Don't we already have that idea? And isn't 23 the same as 17? I think it might be. I'm thinking whether I'm missing anything if I don't change some of these into premises. The thing that I'm a little focused on is the claim this principle extends to any infractions for which normal people would lose their jobs. Here we're just talking about serious crimes. I'm not sure if actions that would cause you to lose your job is the same as committing serious crimes. You know, the more I think about it, the more I think this is just repetitive. We have this idea that schools and leagues and other institutions don't always do it. If they're not disciplined, bad things happen. That justifies our doing it as fans. I think 23 is the same as 17. I'm going to delete that. I don't think this adds any more to it. Yeah, I think I'm done with this. I think this, I'm just going to delete that little extra box. I think that's really the central part of number 3. You might disagree. You might say, no, there's some other premises in there, and that might be perfectly reasonable. So what I'm going to do now is move this sub-argument down here. And in fact, I'm going to move it over to my third box. Things are getting crowded. But you know what? We can make the page as big as we want. So if we end up that we want more across, we'll do that.